Hello everyone, this is Shadow. Due to copyright restrictions on YouTube, I can't publish many of the audiobooks you love. That's why I've created a special paid service where you can enjoy over 300 high-quality audiobooks from platforms like Webnovel, Pocket FM, Audible, Wuxia, and more. Each novel comes as a one-time purchase, no subscriptions, no hidden fees. After payment, you'll receive full access via Telegram, along with all future updates for that novel. You'll find a wide selection of your favorite genres and titles, always in premium audio quality. Check the full list of available novels in the description. DM me now to get your favorite stories in audiobook form and start listening today. Chapter 1041. An Invitation. The silence in the Kagu ancestral estate's courtyard was absolute, heavier than the reinforced shields shimmering overhead. We stood amidst the gathered might of Earth's defenders, 9 peak radiance, Alice, Tiamat's imposing projection. Yet the atmosphere was thick with the chilling residue of Alisara's contemptuous withdrawal. Her dismissal, her sheer disappointment, echoed louder than any threat. Suspended in the air before me, where the last vestiges of her oppressive presence had lingered, hung the impossible letter. Ancient parchment, sealed with the strange crest of a sightless tree and a watchful eye, pulsed with a faint, internal golden light. It felt alien, yet undeniably directed, a final, deliberate message left in her wake. "What is that?" Ren asked, his voice low, cautious. He stepped closer, his body tense. His god's eyes narrowed in intense concentration, attempting to pierce the letter's veil. After a moment, a frown creased his usually serene features. "I cannot see into it. There is a conceptual interference. It resists observation, actively." Lucifer moved beside him, his own potent perception focused on the enigmatic object. His crowns of light and shadow flickered erratically as he probed its nature. "Same here," he confirmed, frustration tightening his voice. "It is shielded, not with conventional energy wards, but with intent. Pure, focused, divine-level intent. Like trying to read thoughts behind a locked door. Their powerful gifts met an unyielding wall, but I felt something different. Not sight, not understanding in the conventional sense. It was resonance. The letter felt like an extension of Alisara herself. A lingering fragment of her will purposefully left behind, tuned specifically to me. It communicated its origin, its purpose, through a subtle, directed vibration that resonated within my own core. It wanted me to open it. It wanted to deliver its final word. Alisara, I thought, the single quote, a cold, hard certainty. Always needing the last word. Even her departures are calculated moves. Reaching out, I felt a faint, almost imperceptible resistance, like pushing through thick, charged air, before my fingers closed around the surprisingly solid parchment. The soft golden light emanating from it faded the moment I took hold. The parchment felt cool, smooth, yet pulsed with a barely contained power that prickled against my senses. A dangerous energy held in delicate stasis. "Arthur, be careful," Alice cautioned, her voice quiet but sharp. Tiamat's projection shifted slightly, her draconic eyes narrowed in suspicion. "It's from her?" I stated simply, meeting the worried gazes of my family. A final message, it seems. There was no point delaying. Whatever barb she had left, whatever psychological blow she intended, it was better faced now, together, with the eyes of everyone in the courtyard fixed upon me. My fiancés tense with apprehension, Lucifer and Ren wary, Alice and Tiamat radiating cautious readiness. I carefully broke the strange, serpentine tree seal. The ancient wax crumbled not into dust, but into faint sparks of golden light. As the seal broke, the parchment didn't simply unfold or fall open. The internal golden light intensified dramatically, flaring outwards in a blinding, yet silent, pulse. The parchment itself dissolved instantly, transforming into a swirling cloud of shimmering golden motes. These motes coalesced rapidly in the air before us, weaving themselves together with impossible speed and precision, forming a translucent, life-sized projection of Alisara. She stood there, suspended a few feet above the ground, looking impossibly regal, serene, and utterly terrifying. She wore flowing crimson silks that seemed woven from solidified desire, rippling slightly as if stirred by an unfelt breeze. Her beauty was inhuman, flawless, yet devoid of any genuine warmth. Her eyes, pools of captivating darkness, held only a cold, possessive amusement as her gaze swept deliberately over the assembled group. Her attention lingered on me for a bare moment, a flicker of something calculating, perhaps reassessing in their depths, acknowledging the minor surprise of my earlier resilience. Then, with obvious, deliberate intent, her gaze dismissed me, sliding past to focus pointedly, Individually, on the others gathered. My 6 fiancés, Lucifer, Rin. Her voice echoed, not through the air, but directly within their minds, bypassing mine entirely for a moment before I forced my perception to intercept the psychic broadcast. It was musical, seductive, yet carried the crushing weight of divine authority. To those who stand beside him, yet remain so fundamentally beneath. The projection began, a faint, condescending smile playing on her perfect lips. A warning, or perhaps, from my new perspective, merely a kindness. As she spoke, a wave of palpable pressure emanated from the projection. It was not a crude blast of energy, but a subtle, insidious exertion of conceptual weight, targeted with chilling precision at the 9 peak radiance surrounding me. My 6 fiancés, Lucifer and Rin. It bypassed Alice and Tiamat, perhaps deeming them irrelevant or simply focusing her demonstration. It was not a physical attack, just a casual flexing of her divine authority, like a giant lightly pressing a thumb against 9 carefully arranged insects to remind them of their fragility. The pressure felt less like force and more like the rules of reality subtly changing around them. Gravity becoming slightly heavier, air slightly thicker, their own internal energy flows meeting an inexplicable viscous resistance. The effect was immediate, visceral. Luna flinched, her hands flying to her temples as her connection to the infinite lines of fate momentarily dissolved into chaotic static under the pressure. Seraphina's glacial aura, usually an unshakable fortress of cold, cracked visibly, fine lines spreading across its surface like stressed ice. Rachel gasped, her knuckles white where she gripped a nearby console for support, her analytical mind struggling against a wave of induced cognitive dissonance as simple physics seemed to waver. Cecilia's regal posture stiffened further, her jaw tightening as she refused to yield even an inch, though a faint tremor ran through her hands. Rose took an involuntary half-step back, her connection to life energy recoiling as if from something fundamentally profane and draining. Reika's hand tightened instinctively on her sword hilt, her body tensing into a combat stance that offered no defense against this kind of pervasive, environmental assault. Lucifer's crowns flared erratically, light and shadow warring violently as he actively fought the intrusion, pushing back with raw will. Ren's breath hitched, his usually serene face paling under the strain as his perception struggled to reconcile the conflicting signals reality was sending. They were peak radiance, beings capable of shaking continents, yet this casual, dismissive exertion of her projected will was enough to make them viscerally, humiliatingly aware of the unbridgeable abyss separating their power from hers. "He is mine," Alisara's projection continued, her cold gaze sweeping over their struggling forms again, utterly dismissive. "His path, his potential, his ultimate culmination, these are matters to be decided between him and I alone. You are distractions, children playing at godhood, clinging to his ankles in the deluded belief you offer support." Her smile widened slightly, becoming sharp, cruel, predatory. "Your power, even at this peak you've so laboriously achieved, is pathetic. An irrelevance measured against the truly divine. You believe you can fight alongside him? You cannot even withstand my idle thoughts without crumbling." The pressure intensified fractionally, forcing choked gasps from several of them. Sweat beaded on Lucifer's brow. Seraphina closed her eyes, focusing all her will on maintaining her integrity against the conceptual weight. "Consider this my final courtesy," the projected Alisara said, her voice turning sharp, cold as the void. "Stay back. Do not interfere in what is to come between Arthur and myself. This is a stage far too grand, far too subtle for your limited roles. Attempt to stand against me, attempt to protect him from his destiny with me." Her mental voice dripped with possessive certainty, "and you will simply die, pointlessly, annoyingly. You are not worthy to even witness the transformation he must undergo." Before I could react, before I could step forward and draw her focus back to me, she acted. Her warning was not just words, it was the prelude to another demonstration, another layer of her cruel lesson. As her final words echoed in their minds, she unleashed a different kind of power, not raw pressure, but a targeted conceptual attack woven from fantasy and control, aimed specifically, exclusively, at my 6 fiancés. "And just so you understand the futility," her voice purred, laced with malice, "allow me to offer you a glimpse into a world where you truly belong." Reality warped visibly around Rachel, Seraphina, Cecilia, Rose, Reika, and Luna. The solid courtyard seemed to shimmer, dissolve. A wave of shimmering golden light, far more intense than the projection itself, pulsed outwards from Alisara's image, enveloping the 6 women completely. It was not an explosion, it felt like an invitation, a seductive, irresistible pull into a perfectly crafted illusion. Their eyes, which had been wide with strain and defiance, suddenly glazed over, losing focus. Their bodies went slack. One by one, They collapsed, not falling violently, but crumpling gently, as if succumbing to a sudden, overwhelming exhaustion. Rachel slumped against the console. Serafina sank to her knees, then onto her side. Cecilia swayed, caught only by Reka, who then folded beside her. Rose simply sat down, her head lolling. Luna's form flickered before she too subsided onto the cold stone floor. Their physical bodies remained unconscious, their faces slack, utterly vulnerable, but their presence, the vibrant peak radiant auras that had moments before filled the courtyard with potent energy, vanished utterly, as if snuffed out by an invisible wind. Their minds, their consciousnesses, had been forcibly drawn away, pulled into the gilded cage Alisara had prepared, a psychic prison woven from fantasy and control. The golden light faded completely. The projection of Alisara lingered for a final, triumphant moment, her cold gaze meeting mine across the now devastated courtyard, where moments before stood 9 peak radiants ready to defend their world. Now only Lucifer, Ran, Alice, Tiamat's projection, and I remained standing amidst the still, unconscious forms of my fiancés. Her smile was absolute, utterly victorious, a silent testament to the effortless demonstration of her power. Lucifer let out a choked sound, a mixture of rage and disbelief, his crowns flaring wildly. Run took an involuntary step back, his god's eyes wide with horror, witnessing a level of conceptual manipulation far beyond even his enhanced perception. Alice's usual calm finally broke, her hands clenching into fists, a flicker of cold fury in her eyes. Tiamat's projection vibrated with barely suppressed draconic wrath. Then, with a final silent pulse that felt like a dismissive wave, Alisara's image dissolved, the golden motes vanishing utterly, leaving only the chilling echo of her warning and the terrifying, immediate reality of her power. The courtyard felt impossibly empty, the silence deafening, punctuated only by the shallow breathing of the 6 unconscious women lying helpless on the cold stone. Chapter 1042, Echoes of Loss. Luna's eyes snapped open, not to the familiar Kagu courtyard, not to Arthur's concerned face, but to gray. Endless, featureless gray. A desolate, windswept gray shoreline stretched before her, meeting a churning sea the color of lead under a perpetually overcast sky. Salt spray kissed her face, cold and biting. Panic seized her instantly. She knew this place, or rather an agonizing echo of it. The conceptual space, the pocket dimension outside of normal causality, where Julius Slatemark, her first contractor, her dear companion, had sealed her away, protecting her from the backlash of his final, desperate act against a foe far beyond his measure. No, her mind screamed. Not here. Not again. Please, not again. Then she saw him. Arthur stood on the shoreline, facing away from her, looking out at the turbulent sea. He wore simple, dark clothing, stark against the gray landscape. There was a stillness about him, but it was not the calm strength she knew. It was a cold, desolate emptiness that seemed to absorb the meager light. He felt like part of this non-place, carved from the same conceptual gray, embodying the same quiet despair that had surrounded Julius's final sacrifice. Arthur. Her voice was a thin thread, nearly lost in the non-sound of the conceptual wind. He turned slowly, his movements lacking their usual fluid grace. His face was impossibly calm. His eyes, usually so full of warmth, determination, or even fierce anger, were cold, distant, holding only a chillingly familiar, pragmatic emptiness. It was the look Julius had worn when explaining the terrible necessity of sealing her away. "Luna," he said, his voice flat, devoid of the love, the connection that formed the bedrock of her existence. "It is necessary." "Necessary? What are you talking about? Where are we?" "We have to get back, Alisara." "Alisara is irrelevant to this decision," he interrupted calmly. "This is about managing variables, ensuring stability. Your nature, Luna, your fundamental connection to the tapestry of fate. It is an element of chaos I can no longer afford in the equation." Her blood ran cold. He sounds just like Julius did, rationalizing the unbearable sacrifice. But this time, it is me being sacrificed. "You see too much," Arthur continued, taking a deliberate step towards her, his presence radiating not warmth, but a cold, irrefutable logic. "You influence outcomes merely by observing them. You introduce unpredictable ripples into the causal stream simply by existing. In the face of a threat like Alisara, and what may come after, such unpredictability cannot be tolerated." What are you saying?" she whispered, dread turning her limbs to ice. "I am saying," he stated, his voice a quiet hammer blow against her heart, "that for the sake of the mission, for the integrity of the timeline required for victory, your unique influence must be neutralized, contained. Your perception makes you a potential anchor for paradox, a focal point for temporal instabilities. You are, forgive the term, A liability. Liability. The word struck her with the force of a physical impact. Julius had sealed her away believing he was the liability, sacrificing himself for her future. Arthur was sealing her away believing she was the liability, sacrificing her for his mission. He thought she was not strong enough, that her very nature was a weakness to be excised. The betrayal felt absolute, a cruel inversion of her past trauma, amplified tenfold by the depth of her love for him. "You can't," she pleaded, tears blurring the desolate gray landscape. "Arthur, please listen to me. Don't do this. My sight, our bond. We can fight her together." "Your sight is the problem," he stated, raising his hand. Gray energy, utterly cold, devoid of the subtle warmth of harmony, coalesced around his fingers. It felt sterile, absolute, a power focused solely on negation. He began to weave it into the conceptual space around her, not forming walls, but drawing lines of causal severance, intricate patterns that resonated with a profound, chilling finality. Seals, woven not from light or magic as Julius might have, but from pure, unraveling non-existence. He was methodically, precisely cutting her off, not just from the physical world, but from the very flow of fate, time, and possibility itself, just as Julius had done, but with cold calculation instead of loving sacrifice. "Arthur, no!" she screamed, raw power erupting from her, golden pure light exploding outwards in a desperate attempt to shatter the forming conceptual cage. But her light, usually so potent against non-divine forces, splashed harmlessly against the shimmering gray seals. They were not barriers to be broken by force, they were statements of ontological fact, reality itself agreeing with her imprisonment, urged on by his will. He looked at her, his expression still that unnerving mask of detached calculation. The man she loved was gone, replaced by this cold strategist who saw her only as a flawed variable. "Forgive me, Luna," he said again, the words utterly meaningless, devoid of genuine regret. "But victory requires certainty. You represent the opposite." The final seal began to form above her, a complex lattice of gray negation, designed to sever her connection to everything, to isolate her consciousness outside the normal bounds of time and causality forever. Absolute despair washed over her, suffocating, complete, trapped, again, betrayed by the one she trusted most, utterly helpless. Just as the final gray strand wove into place, completing the seal, locking her within a silent, timeless, fateless void, she felt it with every fiber of her being. A snap. It was not a sound in the gray emptiness. It was a profound, visceral severance originating from the deepest core of her soul. The bond, the unique, resonant connection forged between her Chilean essence and Arthur's spirit. The golden thread that had anchored her, defined her, given her purpose since the day they met, shattered. Irrevocably, gone. And with its absolute disintegration came the immediate, soul-destroying certainty. Arthur was dead. Somewhere far away, beyond the unbreachable walls of her conceptual prison. Fighting the battle she should have been beside him for, he had fallen. He had died. And she, the being whose very essence was intertwined with the perception of fate, had been trapped here, blind, helpless, unable to foresee it, unable to prevent it, unable even to reach him in his final moments. Her greatest fear, the echo of Julius's protective sacrifice twisted into the ultimate betrayal and loss, realized in the most agonizing way imaginable. The universe went silent. Purpose dissolved into meaninglessness. There was only the gray emptiness, and the echoing, infinite void where his soul, her anchor, had been. Chapter 1043, Unworthy. Reka opened her eyes. The transition was seamless, instantaneous. One moment she felt the psychic pull of Alisara's attack in the Kagu courtyard. The next she stood on familiar ground, or an unsettlingly perfect replica of it. A vast, minimalist training hall stretched before her, sunlight streaming through high, arching windows, illuminating motes of dust dancing in the still air. Polished wooden floor, weapon racks lining one wall holding only simple, unadorned practice swords. It wasn't training ground Omega, nor any space within the Creighton estate. It felt older, imbued with a palpable aura of profound discipline, focus, and a reverence for the blade that resonated deep within her soul. Echoes, faint but distinct, of Magnus Drakar's legendary presence seemed to linger here, a standard she felt acutely, even though she had never met the man herself. Arthur stood opposite her, perhaps 10 yards away across the empty floor. But it wasn't Arthur, not the man she loved, the quiet pillar of strength whose trust was the foundation of her renewed life. This was Arthur the Master, the sole inheritor of Magnus' will. His face carved into lines of cold, profound, and utterly devastating disappointment. He held a simple wooden bakken, mirroring the one that suddenly felt alien and impossibly heavy in her own hand. "Again," he commanded, his voice sharp, devoid of any warmth or patience, echoing slightly in the vast, empty hall. Her body responded automatically, muscle memory honed by 2 relentless years of obsessive training taking over. She moved, flowing through a complex sequence from the sword art Arthur had painstakingly reconstructed for her from the hidden, higher-level notes within Magnus Drakar's manual, the sacred legacy he had chosen to entrust to her alone. Her form, practiced tens of thousands of times, should have been flawless. Her energy flow, now amplified to the peak radiant level alongside his, should have been seamless, the blade a perfect extension of her disciplined will. It felt perfect, the culmination of every drop of sweat, every ounce of effort she had poured into proving herself worthy. Arthur parried her strike with contemptuous, almost lazy ease. His Bakken intercepted hers not with brute force, but with a subtle, infuriating precision that sent jarring, dissonant vibrations humming up her arm, highlighting a dozen microscopic flaws she hadn't even perceived, a fractional imbalance in her weight distribution, a millisecond delay in the rotation of her hips, a barely perceptible wavering of intent just nanoseconds before the intended impact. His simple, almost dismissive block didn't just stop her attack, it dissected it, laid bare its inherent weaknesses, its fundamental lack of true mastery. "Sloppy," he stated, his voice like chipping ice against granite. "Your foundation remains unstable. Your transitions are hesitant, lacking the absolute conviction required. You still fight like a student afraid to commit fully to the strike, perpetually holding back, afraid of the edge." Reika faltered, the unexpected, brutal critique striking deep into the core of her being, targeting her lifelong pursuit of perfection, of absolute, unwavering discipline. She had pushed herself beyond exhaustion, dedicated every waking moment to mastering this art, to honoring the trust he had placed in her. "Do you even comprehend the weight of the legacy you presume to carry?" Arthur interrupted, his cold gaze unwavering, gesturing dismissively first at the Bakken trembling slightly in her hand, then at the intangible, yet palpable, presence of Magnus Drakar that seemed to fill the hall like unspoken judgment. His art, his philosophy, it is not a mere collection of techniques to be drilled into muscle memory. Reika, it is a state of being, a commitment to absolute precision, absolute finality, absolute truth expressed through the blade. "And you?" He paused, letting the weight of his disappointment settle upon her like a physical burden. "You treat it like a ceremonial robe, worn for show, far too large and heavy for your inadequate frame." His words were not just criticism, they were targeted, psychological barbs, each one striking precisely at her deepest, most guarded insecurities. Her entire existence, since the moment Arthur had pulled her back from the brink of oblivion, had been a quiet, relentless quest to prove herself worthy of his trust, worthy of the second chance at life he had inexplicably granted her, worthy of the monumental legacy of the martial king, a man she revered as a symbol of ultimate martial attainment but had never known personally. The fear of failing, that implicit trust, of being found fundamentally wanting despite her absolute dedication, was a constant, gnawing shadow beneath her calm, disciplined exterior. "I am doing my best," she whispered, her voice barely audible, her usual iron composure beginning to fracture under the unexpected, brutal assault from the person whose opinion mattered more than any other. "Your best is demonstrably insufficient," Arthur snapped, his voice echoing harshly in the suddenly cold, cavernous hall. "Potential is meaningless without flawless execution. Discipline without true understanding is merely mimicry. I pulled you back from despair. I gave you purpose where there was none. I placed my own master's sacred art, his very soul expressed through the blade, into your hands." His voice dropped, laced with a chilling finality. "Believing mistakenly, it seems, that you possessed the necessary discipline, the unwavering spirit, the innate capacity to embody its truth." He shook his head slowly, a gesture of profound, weary disappointment that cut deeper than any physical blow could have. "It appears I vastly overestimated you. Saving you, and trusting you with this, it was a mistake. A mistake." The phrase resonated in the hollow space that suddenly opened within her chest, shattering her carefully constructed sense of self-worth, her entire reason for being. He regretted saving her. He believed she had failed him, failed Magnus, failed everything. The years of tireless effort, the sacrifices, the pain, all rendered meaningless by this single, devastating judgment. As if summoned by the sheer, crushing weight of her despair, a small figure appeared silently at the edge of the training floor. Stella, older now, perhaps 15, her face holding none of its usual bright, insatiable curiosity, only a cold, assessing distance that mirrored Arthur's own. She looked Reika up and down, her gaze lingering on the Bakken in Reika's trembling hand with something akin to disdain, then met Reika's desperate, pleading eyes. "You failed him," Stella stated, her voice chillingly flat, devoid of any childish warmth or affection. "You couldn't even live up to Master Magnus' memory. someone you never even knew. And you failed Daddy. She took a small, deliberate step backward, physically distancing herself, as if Reika were something contaminated, something broken beyond repair. Her next words were delivered with brutal, surgical precision. You are not my mommy anymore. The simple, declarative sentence struck Reika with the force of an executioner's blade, severing the final thread holding her together. Failing Arthur was an agony she could barely comprehend. Failing the intangible legacy of Magnus Dracar was a profound, deep shame that stained her very soul. But being rejected by Stella, the child she loved with every fiber of her being, the brilliant, stubborn little star who had unknowingly become the anchor of her world, the reason behind her relentless pursuit of strength, that was annihilation. Her grip slackened, strength fleeing her limbs. The Bakken slipped from her numb fingers, clattering loudly, obscenely, onto the polished wooden floor. The training hall seemed to warp and darken around her, the sunlight turning cold and gray, the inspiring echoes of Magnus replaced by the crushing, suffocating weight of her own inadequacy, her own unforgivable, irredeemable failure. She had been given everything: life, love, purpose, legacy. And in the eyes of the two people who mattered most in the universe, she had proven utterly, hopelessly unworthy. The floor seemed to rush up to meet her as darkness claimed the edges of her vision. Chapter 1044, Withering Garden. Darkness consumed Reika's collapsing consciousness. The final, devastating words, "You are not my mommy anymore," echoing in the void. But the psychic assault woven by Alisara did not grant oblivion. As Reika's awareness fragmented, the focus of the divine puppeteer shifted seamlessly, drawing another soul into its meticulously crafted torment. Rose opened her eyes, not to the cold stone of the Kagu courtyard, not to the concerned faces of her family, but to a place both achingly familiar and fundamentally wrong. She stood in a vast, impossibly perfect glass conservatory. Sunlight, filtered to a precise, sterile luminescence, streamed through the flawless panes, illuminating rows upon rows of roses. Blue roses, but not her blue roses, the ones that held the scent of quiet comfort and honest growth. These were unnaturally vibrant, their color too deep, their petals arranged with a geometric precision that felt cold, calculated. The air was warm, humid, yet carried no scent of damp earth or living blossoms, only a faint, cloying sweetness, like artificial perfume. It was a perfect garden, and it felt utterly dead. A figure moved among the unnerving blooms, tending to them with graceful, practiced hands that held silver pruning shears. Tall, elegant, radiating an aura of absolute, chilling control. Her mother. Rose's breath caught in her throat, a knot of old fear and suffocating duty tightening in her chest. Her mother was dead. Rose herself had been the one who had finally stopped her years ago, a desperate act of self-preservation against a suffocating, manipulative presence that sought to twist Rose's gift, her very essence, into a tool, a weapon. Yet here she stood, seemingly corporeal, radiating that same unnerving aura of command. "Rose, darling," the projection of her mother said, her voice a melody laced with ice, not turning around, punctual as always, though your energy feels cluttered. Still clinging to those sentimental attachments, I see. You are not real," Rose whispered, her hands trembling slightly. Her peak radiant power felt sluggish here, muted, as if the sterile atmosphere itself dampened her connection to true life. Her mother finally turned, a serene, knowing smile on her face. It was the smile Rose remembered from childhood, the one that always preceded a cutting remark disguised as loving guidance. "Real? What is real, child? Is the memory of my disappointment not real? Is the necessity of control not real?" She gestured with the shears towards a rose whose petals deviated slightly from perfection. With a single, precise snip, she removed the offending petal. "See? Order must be maintained. Sentimentality, empathy. These are weeds in the garden of power. They choke potential. True strength lies in utilizing life force efficiently, directing it, shaping it to one's will, not coddling it." The words echoed countless lectures from her past, the core of her mother's twisted philosophy. Alisara's fantasy was not just showing her a ghost, it was forcing her to relive the ideological prison she had fought so hard to escape. "That is not strength," Rose countered, forcing her voice to remain steady. "That is violation. Life is meant to grow, to connect, not to be controlled." Her mother laughed softly, a sound devoid of warmth. "Still so naive. You had the potential, Rose, the raw power, but you squandered it on nurturing, on feelings." She took a step closer, her eyes sharp, analytical. "Though perhaps killing me taught you something after all. A necessary pruning. You finally showed a spark of ruthlessness, a willingness to cut away what holds you back." Perhaps there is hope for you yet. The deliberate twisting of her most traumatic memory, framing the act of desperate self-defense as an embrace of her mother's cruelty, struck Rose with nauseating force. Bile rose in her throat. Before Rose could retort, another figure appeared beside her mother, materializing from the sterile sunlight. Arthur. But not her Arthur. This projection wore his face, his form, but his eyes were cold, assessing, mirroring the calculating gaze of her mother. He looked Rose up and down, his expression one of faint disappointment. She is right, Rose? This false Arthur said, his voice lacking its usual warmth and resonant kindness. Your sentimentality is a liability. In the battles to come, against foes like Alisara, against the darkness gathering, we cannot afford weakness. We cannot afford hesitation born from misplaced empathy. He gestured around the sterile conservatory. Your mother, for all her flaws, understood the necessity of control, the efficient application of power. You possess a unique gift, a connection to life itself. Stop treating it like a bomb and start wielding it like the weapon it is meant to be. Sight. User prompt. His gaze hardened. We need soldiers, Rose, not gardeners. Shed this weakness. Embrace your mother's pragmatism. Become the potent force you were always capable of being. Stop clinging to these useless attachments and become the weapon we need you to be. The words, coming from him, shattered Rose's defenses in a way her mother's never could. Her deepest fear, not just of her mother's influence, but of losing herself in Arthur's shadow, of her gentle nature being seen as inadequate in his world of gods and monsters, was laid bare. He saw her love, her nurturing spirit, not as a strength, but as a flaw to be corrected, a weakness hindering the war effort. Tears welled in her eyes. The urge to please him, to be what he needed, warred violently with the core of her being. She felt her own life force stir within her, usually a warm, flowing river, now feeling constricted, pressured, tempted to sharpen itself into the cutting blades her mother had always envisioned. The weapon Arthur now seemed to demand. She could feel how to do it, how to twist vitality into a tool of control, of dominance. The knowledge felt inherent, a dark echo of her lineage. Her mother smiled, sensing the internal conflict. Yes, child. Let go. Become strong. Make him proud. Make me proud. The false Arthur nodded in agreement, his cold eyes expectant. Rose looked at the sterile, perfect blue roses surrounding her. She looked at the projection of her mother radiating cold control. She looked at the projection of Arthur, demanding she sacrifice her essence to become a tool. And something within her, something deeper than fear, deeper than the desire to please, finally rebelled. No. The single quote was a whisper of defiance in her soul. This isn't strength. This isn't Arthur. This isn't life. She closed her eyes, shutting out the suffocating perfection of the conservatory, the demanding gazes. She reached inward, past the fear, past the imposed narrative, searching for the feeling she knew to be true. She remembered the warmth of Stella's hand in hers, the chaotic, vibrant energy of a Real forest, the feeling of sunlight on healthy soil, the quiet strength in Arthur's genuine smile when he looked at her, not a weapon. She focused on the simple, undeniable truth of growth, of connection, of life affirming itself, messy and imperfect and beautiful. Her own peak radiant power, usually flowing outwards, turned inwards, suffusing her being with that core truth. It wasn't an attack against the illusion, it was an assertion of her fundamental nature. She opened her eyes. The conservatory was still there, her mother and the false Arthur still watching. But at her feet, pushing defiantly through a hairline crack in the flawless, sterile floor, a single, tiny, ordinary green weed was unfurling its leaves towards the artificial light. It was small, insignificant, yet vibrantly, stubbornly alive. Real. Rose stared at it, a tiny anchor in the suffocating sea of Alisara's fantasy. The illusion hadn't shattered. The oppressive weight of the divine presence still pressed down. But a seed of resistance had been planted. Her own truth, small and vulnerable, was pushing back against the sterile perfection of the lie. The fight was far from over, but for the first time since being trapped, Rose felt the stirrings not of despair, but of hope. Chapter 1045, Unbreakable Cycles. Rachel's awareness snapped into focus not with a gasp, but with a jolt of pure, ice-cold terror that constricted her chest, instantly familiar and utterly nauseating. She was small again, no older than 8, her limbs feeling clumsy, her perspective low to the ground. She stood just outside a heavy, ornate door in the Creighton estate, specifically, the wing her mother had occupied during that terrible period. Sunlight streamed through a high window nearby, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air, catching the gold in her own childhood hair, glinting off the polished, sterile perfection of the corridor floor. The air was unnaturally still, carrying the faint, cloying scent of stale perfume and something else. Ozone? Fear? Her small hand trembled as she reached for the doorknob, an echo of a past self acting out a scene she had relived 1,000 times in her darkest dreams. The door creaked open slightly, just as it had then, revealing a sliver of the room beyond. And there she was, her mother, Isolde. But this wasn't the Isolde who had knelt before her years ago, broken and remorseful. This was the Isolde etched into her deepest trauma, the seer consumed by visions, radiating a cold, judgmental distance that felt like a physical weight. She sat in a high-backed armchair, bathed in the same sterile sunlight, looking impossibly beautiful and terrifyingly remote. "Mommy!" The word escaped Rachel's lips, small, hesitant, the voice of a child desperate for reassurance. The projected Isolde turned her head slowly. Her eyes, usually a sharp, intelligent blue, seemed distant, unfocused, yet held a chilling certainty. A faint, almost imperceptible glow flickered within them. A smile touched her lips, but it didn't reach her eyes. It was a mask, stretched thin over unimaginable horrors. "Rachel, darling," the projection said, her voice the melodic chime Rachel remembered from before everything changed. "Come here," hesitantly, propelled by the phantom hope of that long-ago child. Rachel pushed the door open wider and stepped inside. The room was exactly as she remembered it, suffocatingly perfect, every object precisely placed, devoid of any warmth or personal touch. "You disappoint me, Rachel," the projected Isolde stated, her voice losing its melodic quality, sharpening into the cutting precision that had flayed Rachel's spirit raw during that week of hell. "Your progress is adequate, merely adequate. Your grasp of fundamental principles remains pedestrian. You lack the necessary vision, the ruthlessness, to truly wield the power inherent in our bloodline." Each word was a perfectly aimed dart, striking the old wounds of inadequacy, the deeply ingrained fear of never being enough. Rachel felt herself shrinking under that cold, assessing gaze, the confident peak radiant momentarily lost within the terrified 8-year-old. Then, the scene shifted, warped sickeningly, the opulent sitting room dissolving like smoke. Rachel found herself standing in a warm, softly lit nursery, filled with gentle colors and the scent of baby powder. Felt real, comforting. A small, intricately carved crib stood in the center of the room. Hesitantly, drawn by an unseen force, Rachel approached it. Inside, a baby girl slept peacefully, wrapped in soft blankets. Her tiny face was a heart-wrenching, impossibly perfect blend of Rachel's own features and Arthur's. A tuft of dark black hair, just like his, peeked out from under the blanket. As Rachel watched, mesmerized, the baby stirred, her eyelids fluttering open. Deep blue eyes, Rachel's own shade, stared up at her, and within them, impossibly, unmistakably, tiny flecks of brilliant gold shimmered. "Our daughter." The single quote hit Rachel with the force of a physical blow, a wave of fierce, overwhelming love surging through her, so potent it almost shattered the illusion right then and there. The baby gurgled, reaching a tiny hand towards her. "Mommy." The single word echoed in the quiet room, impossibly sweet. Rachel's heart ached. She reached down, wanting nothing more than to scoop the child into her arms, to protect this impossible, precious life. But as her hand drew near, she heard a voice. Her own voice, cold, sharp, echoing with Isolde's cruel cadence. "You disappoint me," her own voice said, seeming to emanate from her against her will. "Your potential is wasted. You lack focus. Merely adequate." She watched in numb horror as her own hand, moving with a will separate from her own, reached out not to caress, but to adjust the baby's blanket with a gesture devoid of any warmth, any tenderness. Her own face, reflected dimly in the polished wood of the crib rail, settled into the same lines of cold, critical judgment she remembered seeing on her mother's face. The baby, sensing the chill, the lack of love, began to whimper, those beautiful blue-gold eyes filling with tears. This was it. Her deepest, most paralyzing terror laid bare. Not just the reliving of her own trauma, the memory of Isolde's abuse, but the horrifying certainty that the damage was inherent, the cycle unbreakable. The fear that the coldness, the fear, the madness she had absorbed from her mother was now a permanent part of her, a poison she would inevitably inflict upon her own child, becoming the very monster she had spent her life vowing never to be. Nausea twisted in her gut. Panic, cold and sharp, clawed at her throat. She wanted to scream, to recoil, to deny the horrifying reflection. But the illusion held her fast, forcing her to confront this unbearable potential future, this seemingly inevitable damnation. "No, please, not this," her mind shrieked. "I won't become her. I won't." But even as the emotional storm threatened to tear her apart, a core part of Rachel's being, the relentless analyst, The scientist who had built her life on logic and evidence remained stubbornly detached, observing, dissecting. It noted the perfection of the nightmare, the precise echo of Isolde's specific verbal barbs, the almost too convenient mirroring of her most secret fear. Felt engineered. The cyclical nature of the abuse narrative, presented so starkly, so predictably, it lacked the messy, illogical, contradictory nuances of real trauma, real human failing. It felt like a carefully constructed hypothesis, a projection designed by an external intelligence, Alisara, specifically to elicit this precise, paralyzing emotional response. This is a construct. The single quote surfaced again, stronger this time, a lifeline of pure, cold logic in the emotional tempest. Flawed, predictable, based on fear amplified by divine power, but ultimately, not real. Not my future. She couldn't simply shatter the illusion through sheer force of will. The divine power underpinning it, Alisara's complete control, was too strong, too pervasive. But she could dissect it. She latched onto the inconsistencies, the predictability of the narrative loop, the subtle wrongness in the projected Arthur, the overly simplistic echo of Isolde. She began analyzing the structure of the nightmare itself, treating it not as a horrifying reality to be endured, but as a flawed dataset, a poorly designed psychological experiment to be deconstructed. She started searching for the core axiom, the faulty premise, the single illogical leap upon which Alisara had built this personalized hell. The fear was still undeniably real, a chilling echo of past pain resonating within her. The image of her potential daughter's tear-filled eyes would likely haunt her. But now, that fear was accompanied by the cold, sharp, and ultimately empowering focus of a scientist who had just found a critical flaw in the enemy's design. The cage might hold for now, but Rachel had found the blueprint. She began looking for the key. Hello everyone, this is Shadow. Due to copyright restrictions on YouTube, I can't publish many of the audiobooks you love. That's why I've created a special paid service where you can enjoy over 300 high-quality audiobooks from platforms like Webnovel, Pocket FM, Audible, Wuxia, and more. Each novel comes as a one-time purchase, no subscriptions, no hidden fees. After payment, you'll receive full access via Telegram, along with all future updates for that novel. You'll find a wide selection of your favorite genres and titles, always in premium audio quality. Check the full list of available novels in the description. DM me now to get your favorite stories in audiobook form and start listening today.